Hello, everyone. My name is George Stiff, and I'm a member of the HRE Roadmap Europe team at ICLEI Europe, and I want to welcome and thank you all for attending the 5th HRE Roadmap Europe webinar. We're hosting this series of webinars about the HRE Roadmap Europe project, which is funded by the European Union, and this is the 5th of 7 webinars for this spring. There will be more to follow in autumn. And for each of the webinars, we dive into a variety of aspects, methodologies, and findings of the HRE Roadmap Europe project. And I just wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available soon on our website and YouTube channel. So to give you an idea about what we're doing today, I will be exploring the beneficial role that HRE Roadmap Europe can play to facilitate strategic city and regional energy planning. My colleague, David Drysdale, is a PhD fellow at Aalborg University and is representing the Lighthouse Europe demonstration project called SmartEnCity, and he will be reflecting on the potential for HRE Roadmap Europe project tools and results in a smart city context. And after our two presentations, there will be a discussion following that with reflections coming from Mr. Tudor Drambarean from Alba Iulia Municipality in Romania. And afterwards, we'll have some time to answer your questions, but you can send your questions as they occur to you on the right side of the GoToWebinar sidebar. At any time during the webinar, simply write your questions. So let me begin with my own presentation. We're here to talk about facilitating integrated energy dialogues in cities and regions. And I'm specifically going to be addressing the idea of how HRE Roadmap Europe can be combined with planning approaches. And I work for ICLEI Europe, which is based in Freiburg, Germany. So to give you an idea about what the HRE Roadmap Europe is in a nutshell, I have 2 slides for you. So what we do in HRE Roadmap Europe is we are mapping demand and resources especially focused on heating and cooling across Europe, and also the heating savings potential across Europe. And this will be all integrated into energy systems modeling. This all can combine into some holistic heat strategies, what we call heat roadmaps, hence HRE Roadmap Europe. We have 5 main tools and results that we're working with, and I'm not going to go into details for all of them. Some of these have already had their webinars, which you can find on our website. Some of them have webinars which are upcoming, which will explain the details of each of them. But suffice it to say that they are focused on 14 EU countries, and these 14 were chosen because they together represent about 90% of all heating and cooling demand across the EU. So what we deal with are 3 pillars mainly. We have the idea that everywhere there's something that you could do for heat savings. This is about balancing savings and supply, and we have found that there are 30 to 50% total reductions which are possible. Within urban areas where you have high heat densities, you can install district heating and cooling networks, and this could supply about 50% of your heating demand. For the rural areas where the heat density is much less, HRE Roadmap Europe suggests that electric heat pumps should be the primary source for heating and cooling, with supplemented by some small shares of solar thermal and biomass. What we want to promote is the idea that solutions already exist, they are technically possible, and they are socioeconomically feasible. But you have to take into account the wider energy system. Don't just consider a silo of heating and cooling only. You also have to think about the relationships with electricity, transport, and other cross-cutting issues. It's also extremely important to consider the local nature of heating and cooling. The context is key. So what do we mean about context and perspective, and why it's crucial in the local and regional perspective? This is largely talking about needs and opportunities. So a city or a region has a need to provide public services. This could be seen as an opportunity to develop integrated systems. There's a need for economic growth. This should be seen as an opportunity to develop green jobs and skills. There's a need to maintain an environmental balance. This should be seen as an opportunity to develop integration of urban and rural nexus. quality of life is an important need for both cities and regions. This should be taken as an opportunity to use some innovative ideas like those found in the HRE Roadmap Europe project. They can help address health and society needs through social engagement. And there's also a need to follow political pressures, but this shouldn't be seen as a burden, but as an opportunity for ambitious planning. So within the climate context, which is what a lot of energy issues are dealt with, there's a need for acting on climate change. This could be seen as an opportunity for local and regional development. So take the example of the picture on the right. Warsaw in Poland is famous or infamous for its smog. They should develop more renewables. This would help reduce the smog. There's been an initiative, which I'm sure everyone here knows about, called the Covenant of Mayors, which about 10 years ago set up goals for 2020, only a few years from now, to have 20% less greenhouse gas emissions, 20% more renewable energy, 20% more efficiency, and this would be encapsulated in sustainable energy action plans. Following that, there was a similar initiative called Mayors Adapt, which tackled things not from the mitigation perspective, but from the adaptation perspective, still on a local and regional level. This then became folded into the new Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. This itself is part of the new Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, along with other regions like Africa, Japan, India, and others. But we're here to talk about Europe. So here in Europe, the new goals are by 2030 to have 40% less greenhouse gas emissions, 27% more renewables, 30% more efficiency, and sustainable energy and climate action plans. The climate there is a symbol for adaptation. So what this means is that we need to think globally, but we have to plan and act locally. So how can you plan and act locally? Here in ICLEI, we've developed a methodology called Green Climate Cities. It's building on 25 years of experience. And the idea is to mobilize you for local climate actions. We would help support you in the development of resource efficiency and green economic initiatives. And we help build the capacity of local and regional leaders to help them take more informed decisions. And last, it also helps to streamline governance mechanisms and the institutions which are using them. What we offer to local and regional authorities are tailored capacity building, and we have a set of compatible tools like those found in HRE Roadmap Europe and methodological guidance to achieve your climate goals. So the methodology is similar to a lot of action planning things. That's a cycle. The first stage is about analysis. It consists of 3 steps. This is mobilization of stakeholders, looking at the different departments in your city or your region, the local businesses, civil society. You also have to assess the situation. You have to build a baseline to know where it is that you're coming from, and then you have to identify priorities to figure out where it is that you want to go to. This should be in line with your city's vision. The second stage is about action. You have to combine all of this information and put it into a comprehensive action plan. But you don't just make it and start implementing it. You also have to make sure that it's approval, not just from the policymakers, but also local businesses, the general public, civil society has to approve of the things that you're planning. And then you can implement it. You have concrete measures to be implemented, but you also have to adopt policy frameworks which actually support their implementation. The final phase is acceleration. You have to monitor the implementation of your plans and the performance of how your city or region is doing. You can also evaluate this, and then you would be reporting on that as well to your local stakeholders. Everyone is aware of what's going on, and you can enhance the entire process by coming up with new ideas, which create a new cycle. So how does HRE Roadmap Europe fit into local regional planning? So to understand this more, let's look at what HRE Roadmap has to offer you. First off, there's country level data. National scale data is not always the best tool to use for local planning, but it still gives you a really good first impression. When you look at some national scale data, like you can find in HRE Roadmap, this gives you a chance to ask yourself, is this valid for my context too? So let's look at forecast data. Here's forecast data for Poland. And what shows is the energy sources used for each of the three main sectors: industry, residential, and services. So if I were a Polish city with a lot of industry, I would look at the left bar and I would see Polish industries use a lot of fossil fuels. I would look and confirm if that's the case for my own local industry, and I would look for what kind of alternatives they could use to fuel their processes. Residential sector in Poland is also very high. It's the highest demand of all three sectors. So I would look into my city. How could I reduce the residential demand? Maybe find some energy savings. And the service sector, it's relatively low heating and cooling demands in Poland. And you can see that it actually has a decent share of district heating, which makes sense because a lot of the service sector is found in the cities. But this could still be increased. Why isn't more of it connected to district heating? Another tool you can look at is the cost curves. So this shows Finland's share of single-family household saving renovations based on the building age. And it's probably too difficult for you to read it now, but basically, as a Finnish city, I would look at this, and it's grouped into the buildings ages, so before 1960, 61 to 1990, 1991 to 2009, and 2010 to 2020. I would look and see what kind of buildings I have in my city, for example, Helsinki, and then I would see what would be a realistic goal for me to achieve in savings for the buildings I have in my city based on this national. Or I could look at it from the other perspective, and I could see how deep are the renovations which are realistic for my buildings to achieve, and therefore I would have an idea about the sort of savings that could be achieved in my city. The final set of tools are the JRC EU Times and Energy Plan, which both feed into things like the smart energy system. These will be featured in upcoming national roadmaps, which identify components for an integrated energy system, which means, again, heating and cooling, plus electricity and transport. So it's all connected to each other. And this can help inform holistic strategies that you have at a local and regional level. It can inform your smart city strategy. It can inform all kinds of other processes that you have going on. Much more interesting, though, for cities and regions is going to be the Pan-European Thermal Atlas, Petta 4.2. So what it does is a combination of bottom-up data and top-down modeling, and it gives you a spatial perspective on heating and cooling demand, which is really valuable for finding synergies with existing infrastructure, smart city development, building stakeholder alliances, even can inform you on social engagement initiatives that you could do in your city. So to give you a better idea of what Petta is capable of doing in your city and region, we're going to look at the example of Glasgow in Scotland. When you look here, you can see that downtown Glasgow has a very high demand of heat. It has about 13 petajoules of heat demand in the city center, and just over half of it is a very high density, which is quite attractive to district heating companies. Even though it's in the north, it actually has a lot of cooling demand too. This is largely driven by the service sector. So all those offices and shops that you can find in downtown Glasgow, as well as some of the larger houses, are really driving that demand. Petta can also tell you about infrastructure costs. They can tell you, you can see that in the downtown area, is where it's most cost effective to install district heating, the pipes and the infrastructure. It shows that it's relatively low, around 2 to 5 euros per gigajoule, and in some cases even less to install district heating systems there. And finally, you can also look at the map in Petta, and you can see where district heating systems currently exist and where they potentially could exist. So if I were working for Glasgow City Council, I would look at this map and see we have district heating systems in this part, but we don't have it here in this suburb. We should think about district heating in this suburb. So Petta is not only useful for demand, but it's also really useful for sources of supply. So especially when you look at a wider perspective, then it helps you to identify linkages for the urban regional nexus, which will help you identify supply that you have outside and demand that you have at a regional scale. So again, Glasgow in the center, but now at a regional scale. So all of these little dots that are here, they each represent industrial facilities which have potentially some excess heat, some heat that's being created and wasted through processes that they're going to be running anyway. So just looking at these little dots, the two on the western side and the three in the northeast, these together come to about 25 petajoules. And if you remember, Glasgow city centre had 13 petajoules. That means that these facilities alone provide twice the wasted heat of Glasgow, and they're only 30 to 40 kilometers away, which is easily within the range for piping into Glasgow. And that's not even including that huge power plant, the big black dot on the top right, which has 55 petajoules of potential wasted heat. I'm also showing here, this might look like a blank map, but if you look in the bottom right side, there's a little yellow speck down there. That represents some solar thermal potential, which is not something that you would stereotypically associate with Scotland, with all of its cloud and fog. But there is some potential there. So this shows that maybe the Glasgow City Council ought to look and see if there's some potential in Glasgow or close by to introduce solar thermal into a district system. There also might be some geothermal potential. Here on the map, you can see that there's a potential reservoir nearby, but you have to do more studies, geological studies, to find out if the temperatures of the water in that aquifer and the water flow rates make it feasible to exploit geothermal for heating and cooling purposes. And there's also biomass potential. Here, when I click on the map, if somebody's moving the mouse, I can see that there's about 2.5 petajoules of technically and economically available biomass residue in Glasgow and in the surrounding areas. It mainly comes from bio-waste. So all of this could be supplies for Glasgow's demand. The next thing we like to promote is the idea of heat synergy regions. And to explain what a heat synergy region is, I'm going to tell you a little story about the city of Helsingborg, which is in southwestern Sweden, just across the sea from Denmark. They wanted to cover their heating demand in a more sustainable manner. When they looked more into it, they found that they had 2 plants of excess heat. This would cover about half their heating demand. They also know that there's a lot of biomass potential in Sweden. Any of you who've ever visited Sweden, you'll think biomass when you're flying in. As they did so, they found some other nearby cities, Landskrona and Lund. Lund is about 50 kilometers away, to give you a sense of scale. These two had together a similar amount of demand as Helsingborg. So what did they do? They created a regional district heating system. This is essentially what we mean by a heat synergy region, is regional district heating. But according to Petta, it's possible that they could do even more than they already have. So you can barely see it on the bottom of the map, but there's Malmö, which is a large city. Why not connect to Malmö? Why not connect to all these other towns and villages which are nearby? They could all be included in this district system. Similarly, you see these three dots up at the top of the screen? Why not connect these industrial facilities also to the heat synergy region? Furthermore, like in Glasgow, there's some solar thermal potential you can see with these yellow specks. So what they should do is they should look into the potential for solar thermal energy within their system. And as you can see, Landskrona and Lund in themselves already have very strong potential. And the final thing to consider is cooling demand. Even though it's Sweden, which we think of as being cold, they have cooling demand. It's largely driven by their service sector. So this should also be taken into account when planning for a heat synergy region. So what does this all mean for planning processes? Go back to the green climate cities. So what you could do with Heat Roadmap Europe is you look at your national data for a first look. You could look at the Petta for a second look, and then you can determine where it is that you need to look even more deeply. So you can identify some new stakeholders that you want to mobilize. Maybe you find some factories in your region, some districts which have high demand, maybe some regional actors which could play a role. You can also look at the demand needs and potential sources of supply. This will help you to devote your resources more efficiently to the in-depth studies on the ground, which you actually need. For example, in Köln, they're already doing some bottom-up mapping initiatives. Also, you can combine your known needs and the data with your vision to determine your priorities. So, for example, in Cork, they found that social housing districts need drastic renovation and new energy supplies. If you have something similar in your town, Petta and HRE Roadmap Europe can help you find this out too. This all comes into the plans. So we find, for example, that the Petta tool is extremely useful as a spatial element, which can give a useful perspective when you're doing your action planning. I give you the example of Tartu in Estonia, which is already doing district heating zoning, and they are identifying existing and new neighborhoods to connect to district heating. You can use HRE Roadmap Europe and especially Petta to do exactly this in your own town. Also, I want to point out that all HRE Roadmap Europe data is available for you to use. Any of you are welcome to integrate it into your own planning documents. And I show you Alba Iulia here because they are part of our city interest and region group, and we're hoping to help them take advantage of HRE Roadmap Europe to make their own heating planning. And we have recommendations which are available based on the national roadmaps, but which can be adapted and applied to your city to help you identify which kinds of actions and policies make sense at a local level. The final phase about acceleration. HRE Roadmap Europe data is a good model that you could use for the kinds of data that you should be collecting to gauge your own performance. And you can even use HRE Roadmap Europe as a benchmark for comparison. I like to give the example of Tilburg. They came to me once with a map of their own district heating company's planned expansion in the city. We looked together at Petta, and we've discovered that there were even more neighborhoods that the company might consider prioritizing, but hadn't yet. And now we hope that the city will go back and discuss it with the company and figure out which makes sense based on Petta and bottom-up data. And the final thing is you have to update your plans. HRE Roadmap Europe is really good at this part too, because if a lot of you already have sustainable energy action plans or smart strategies or other kinds of planning documents, our project results can help you enhance them in future updates. And to give you the example of right here in Freiburg, where I am, we still lack a citywide district heating system, but the city's already making new plans to integrate district heating into new areas, like near this football stadium that they're building, which will take advantage of excess heat from nearby industries. Final thing I want to talk about is the case of Alba Iulia, Romania, who is one of our most energetic members of the City and Region Interest Group. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but just wanted to give you an idea of what it's like there. They already have a district heating system, but it's currently being refurbished. And part of this is because, like over much of Eastern Europe, and Romania in particular, there's a problem of many people which are disconnecting from district heating. So there's a strong need to win them back as customers. So what kind of a direction does HRE Roadmap Europe suggest for Alba Iulia? Well, let's look at the Petta data first. When you look at the Petta data, you see Alba Iulia here, the blob to the northern part, has about half a petajoule of demand. About half of that is high density, which should be very attractive for a district heating company. And only 12 kilometers to south, there's a little blue dot, as you can see in the other town, Sebes. That's a factory for wood products. And according to Petta, it has theoretically up to 1 petajoule of wasted heat. That means it's already twice the amount of heat that Alba Iulia even needs. Looking at a regional scale, look at these yellow flecks around there. There's actually quite decent solar thermal potential in Romania, and Alba Iulia really should look into this more. There's also the pale yellow blob, which is geothermal potential. This is a neogene basin, which basically means it's porous sedimentary rock with good water flow. But they need to do some geologic studies to make sure if it's economically feasible to tap into this geothermal heat as well. Sorry. And there's also biomass potential, which is the green outside of Alba Iulia. And this is to show that there is about 2.8 petajoules of technically and economically available biomass residue in Alba Iulia County. Most of it's from forest and straw. but this already is now 6 times the amount of Alba Iulia's needs. So putting this all together, what will we recommend for Alba Iulia is that they should connect themselves to this town and to their south, Sebes. They should connect themselves to the wood factory, which is there. And they should also connect all these little towns, these gray blobs you can see on the left map, to make a small heat synergy region. They could explore whether solar, thermal, geothermal, or biomass inputs also make sense for them. On the demand side, they can look at the forecast data. This is the national data and for the residential sector. And what you can look at and you can see is for space heating for single family homes, Romanian houses seem to use an awful lot of biomass, likely in wood stoves. So what Alba Iulia should do is they should look into see how efficiently their homes are actually using this biomass. And also you can see that there's almost no district heating for these single family homes. Why is it that so few are connected to district heating for individual homes? What kind of social engagement needs to be done to connect them or to bring them back if they left the system? This is the sort of recommendations that we could provide you from HRE Roadmap Europe, and you can find yourself by using our results. So to conclude, just wanted to say that HRE Roadmap Europe can work for you. Doesn't matter what kind of institution you are, but it's particularly useful for you in the local, regional, and national authorities. We have results and tools which will help you on your sustainable energy action plans, your regional action plans, your renewable energy and energy efficiency action plans. We help you figure out where you could expand district heating and cooling, and where it doesn't make sense, we can help you identify that heat pumps and other decentralized renewables make more sense. We also have cross-cutting solutions like HRE Regions, and we can help complement your smart city development strategies. We have business cases and policy recommendations. The basic idea is that HRE Roadmap Europe can orient you towards feasible solutions with cost-effective investments, help you in your planning processes, and we offer long-term roadmaps that you can make use of. So final thing, I wanted to plug a group that we have called City and Region Interest Group. Any of you are free to join. And once you're a member, then you can freely use HRE Roadmap Europe policy guidelines or business cases, online tools for your own energy plans, smart city strategies, or whatever other processes you have going on to support your climate and energy targets. All of these are available to the public. You don't have to join our group, but when you do join our group, then we help support you even more intensely, and we give you increased visibility to your city or region for promotions and events. And we also offer a pathway for you to influence policy, investment, and other dialogues across Europe. All we ask is that you let us know that you're interested. You can also let us know which policy and planning processes you are currently working on and how you think HRE Roadmap might be able to help you out. So all we ask you is that you could join these cities here, and in particular, Alba Iulia, which will be featured later today. These are our 7 city and region interest groups, and we want to know which one of you is going to be next. Thank you. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, one moment, to my colleague David, who will be speaking about, SmartEnCity.
Thank you very much, George. Very interesting for me to see that presentation. I'm going to be talking about another project, SmartEnCity. And I guess I'm going to be talking about SmartEnCity from an angle where this project does not have a lot of heating planning going on. And I'm looking at it from how can HRE Roadmap Europe and the tools and the Petta maps help to inform SmartEnCity about heat planning. Okay, so I'll just give an introduction to the SmartEnCity project first, and then at the end I will try to make some sort of link with the HRE Roadmap Europe project. The SmartEnCity project is a Horizon 2020 smart city project. It's based on the European Innovation Partnership priority areas. So the project is focusing on sustainable urban mobility, sustainable districts and the built environment, and integrated infrastructures and processes like district heating and heat networks. But the project is also looking at other themes around citizen engagement, policy and regulation, knowledge sharing, standards and business models. And the way the project is looking at this is through different measures that are being implemented in different cities in the project. And I'll talk about them soon. But the main objective of the SmartEnCity project is to create an adaptable and replicable approach that can help cities in Europe to transform into sustainable, smart, and resource-efficient urban environments. So SmartEnCity is a way to test some of the measures in some cities and to create a method or an approach to be replicated for other European cities. The aim is to achieve this through integrated planning and the implementation of these different measures, which I'll show you in the next slide. And these measures aim to improve energy efficiency and also to increase the supply of renewable energy in the cities. Another big part of the project is about how to replicate the learnings and the knowledge developed in the project. So the aim is to develop a framework for replication of the SmartEnCity strategy and approach so that it can be replicated in other cities. And to do this, we have developed a SmartEnCity network where cities can join and can learn from this project. So in practical terms, the project involves 3 lighthouse cities: Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain, Tartu in Estonia, and Sonneborg in Denmark. In each of these lighthouse cities, we're implementing different measures, and we're learning about how these can be implemented in other cities. We have 2 follower cities, which are Lecce in Italy and Asenovrad in Bulgaria. These cities don't actually implement any measures, but the aim is that they learn directly from the lighthouse cities, and they help us understand what is the easy things to learn and what are the more difficult things to learn in order for us to be able to make a good replication strategy for other cities outside this project. There are 35 partners in the project, and it finishes in 2021. So for replication in the project to be successful, the aim is that during the project, we will describe the project results and the lessons learned. So far, we already have some reports that summarize some of the findings so far. We make them available on our website and also in the SmartEnCity network website. And we also are getting ready to give advice to follower cities and other cities that join the SmartEnCity network. Here is just some of the demo actions or the measures that we are implementing in the project in each of the lighthouse cities. The measures are implemented in each of the main pillars that are being focused on by the EU. So this is building, retrofitting, integrated infrastructures, sustainable mobility, and ICT as well. Each of the cities is integrating, is doing building, retrofitting, and but the cities are integrating different infrastructures. For example, in Vitoria-Gasteiz, they're implementing a biomass boiler with a new district heating network, whereas in Tartu, they're putting in smart street lighting. So different cities have different technologies, and the aim is to learn about how each of these measures is integrated in the city. So A big part of the project, as I mentioned before, is replication. So first way of doing this is that we're doing it through the SmartEnCity network. The website is in the slide. We're also developing a replication framework and toolkit, and we are also transferring the knowledge from the lighthouse cities to the follower cities to help them develop integrated energy plans. And we're also making replication roadmaps for the lighthouse cities and the follower cities. So overall, the framework of this toolkit involves integrated energy plans, new business models for the different measures, replication roadmaps for the measures and expanding them outside or around the cities and in other cities, and communication and transfer tools for communicating the findings that we find from this project. And this is the whole concept of the replication in SmartEnCity. So the question is, how does HRE Roadmap Europe connect with SmartEnCity, and where? Well, in SmartEnCity, we have a strategy which guides the replication process. This diagram here is trying to demonstrate this strategy in a nutshell. But if we look at the arrow in the red box, this vertical arrow going from the top down is demonstrating how the different measures are implemented in the project. So we start with the strategic phase, where we describe, for example, the biomass boiler in Vitoria-Gasteiz. We describe what is the strategy for this boiler and the district heating system. How do we get citizens involved? And then there's the pre-intervention, where we draw up the concept. Then we do intervention, where we build the boiler, and then we do post-intervention, where we understand how it's operated. But a big part of the project is not just implementing these measures, but it's also about making a strategy for the entire city to understand how each of these measures is implemented, in terms of knowing which measures to implement and how much of each measure we should implement. For example, how much district heating or how much of a heating technology should be implemented in the city. This is where HRE Roadmap Europe can be useful, is in the strategic phase for the city planning. So in the strategic phase in SmartEnCity, it is about the strategic planning of individual projects or individual measures, but it's also about the planning for the city as a whole. So in the SmartEnCity project, we don't actually focus on heating or heat planning at all. But the usefulness of HRE Roadmap Europe and the Petta maps is that it is so easy to be able to look at the maps and extract some data and to test some scenarios, that actually within the strategy development phase in SmartEnCity, we can actually use these maps and data very quickly. We can use them within workshops where we actually are doing the scenario planning for a certain city in the project. So in the strategic phase in SmartEnCity, we have a few actions that we take, which is, number one is mapping and analyzing the current smart city and urban development trends. So in this mapping and analysis, the Petta maps and the data from HRE Roadmap Europe can be extremely useful to inform us about what kind of urban development or heating development we can do. The other thing is that when we are making the strategic plan, we are testing different scenarios. So again, the HRE Roadmap Europe data can be very useful to input into our scenarios. Or we didn't know about this type of data, in the SmartEnCity project, we wouldn't actually probably consider heat planning or the entire city and its heating supply in the future. We would maybe only focus on a certain number of technologies, but not a holistic plan for heating. The other thing is that in the project, we are doing networking with key actors, where we look at these scenarios and we look at the impacts and the implications on these actors into the future. And in these, with these actors, we do workshops. And during these workshops, having a tool that we can have on the screen can easily help us, or can be very useful for helping us with real-time scenario development and discussions with the different actors. And ultimately, in the project, we look at developing a path for the smart city strategies and the initiatives that we will implement in the various fields in integrated energy plans, which means we look at what do we do for electricity, what do we do for heating, what do we do for mobility. And of course, the HRE Roadmap Europe data and maps are very useful as input into this integrated energy planning process. So in summary, that's all I'm going to talk about today. I think overall, the HRE Roadmap Europe input at least provides a new discussion point, which we can use in our strategic planning, and it can be extremely useful for us as we go forward in this project. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your input. And I think that there are a lot of overlaps which can be found between each of our projects. And next, I would like to see if he's here and introduce Tudor Drambarean from Alba Iulia Municipality in Romania. He's, as I mentioned, our contact point for the city and region interest group there in Alba Iulia, and we've invited him here to give some sort of reflections on what HRE Roadmap Europe and SmartEnCity can have for city-level practitioners.
Hi, George. Thank you very much for the invitation on behalf of our municipality. It's a privilege to be here with you online. Sorry for the delay. We had some overlapping with the other events. Obviously, we are an active municipality, like you said, and there's always lots of things going on. We try to be as active as possible, even though we're a small municipality in Europe. We have around 70,000 inhabitants, and we also want to become the next smart city in Romania. So we are, as I said, we are a medium-sized municipality which has accessed numerous funds in the last 7-10 years, around 200 million euros, which were used for local development projects of all sorts, from renewable energy projects, which is our focus, but also heritage protection, restoration, mobility, social projects, business promotion, etc. So a lot of projects implemented in the last 7-10 years. And now one of the latest projects we're implementing with the Ministry of Communication and Information Society, but in partnership with over 60 companies so far, is the Smart City pilot project, which was started about a year and a half ago and should last till the end of 2018. It's an innovative project, an innovative marketing concept where we invite the companies to test their solutions in Alba Iulia with the occasion of the centenary, meaning the celebration of 100 years of Romanian existence, which was signed in Alba Iulia 100 years ago. So the idea is that companies come here and they test their solution on their own budget. So we offer them the field, the city is the expo for these companies to showcase their smart city solutions, and they come with solutions in various topics from mobility to energy efficiency, smart parking, e-citizenship platforms and solutions, and the list can continue. We have at the moment around 70 solutions which are either implemented or under implementation uh, at the moment, so they will be initiated soon. We hope to reach 100 by the end of the year. And some of the solutions are even in the district heating area, since we have companies which will install smart meters on several public buildings which have a high energy demand. And we will use these solutions to efficientize their consumption, to be able to better measure their real-time consumption, and to create saving uh, at the utilities level, since we are focusing on large consumption buildings. Also, in the future, we want to go into the private buildings area where also there's a high consumption. At the city level, since a lot of buildings are not thermally retrofitted, and the municipality is doing lots of efforts with EU funding and sometimes with private funding to retrofit a lot of these buildings in order to uh, bring savings in energy and in CO2 reduction, and also to reach the milestones set through the Convent of Mayors and through the Sustainable Energy Action Plan of the municipality, which also foresees a reduction of CO2 and of energy consumption of uh, residential buildings, but also public buildings in the transport area, etc., in order to um, to reach the objectives of the city development strategy for 2014 2020. I don't know if you can you say something. I'm not sure you're hearing me right now.
Oh, we can hear you. It's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
So that was very shortly put. In the next years, our municipality is focusing also on changing the public lighting system with intelligent lighting bulbs. It has already installed on 4 public buildings um, over 1,500 solar panels, which are used for the energy consumption of those buildings. It was done through a European project, and the aim is to continue in this direction, to focus more on renewable energy, to reduce the carbon footprint of buildings, and to have more smart metering tools available to use in order to efficientize the consumption of buildings. Now, regarding the HRE Roadmap Europe project and the Petta tool, which is a very innovative tool and can support a lot the activity of municipalities, we can say that this tool has the capacity to to provide new data for municipalities and to better understand on a local scale what the needs are at local level, the challenges, but also the opportunities. So we've tested the tool for the tool, and there are many interesting things that it offers, since it's not only a thermal map of can provide a lot of other data from the biomass resources, solar thermal, district heating. Of course, you can observe the profile of your city at regional level as well. But tools like this we've always embraced because they allow you to forecast certain things in terms of energy demand and to better observe the local realities in terms of energy at local level. So we are very keen on testing other tools such as Petta and to use them in our local development projects also in the future. And we also want to see how other cities are using this tool, because of course we know that we don't know everything in this area. Maybe we know our local realities, but what's happening in Europe, in other cities, it's a completely different story. And how they use such a tool as Petta is also very interesting for us to learn from them and to have an exchange of experience in this area, and to better observe what our real needs are at the end of the day. So, but shortly speaking, this would be our input. I could mention that we've tested also other smart city platforms before, and they're all very interesting. Some are more user friendly than others. Petta is pretty user friendly from what we've tested, and they all these tools bring an added value in the fact that they provide the municipalities with new platforms which are relatively not very costly, and the output that they bring is quite substantial because they a lot of times they have the capacity to integrate also the information from other platforms. So I think this would be an added value to be able to integrate the information from different sources and to use it on such a tool such as Petta, which it already does pretty well, and hopefully it can even be developed more in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tudor. On that point, I actually would be able to say that we are continuing to develop the Petta tool, as I mentioned, as other results from the HRE Roadmap Europe project. So stay tuned. I believe in the fall, in the autumn, we are planning on having a Petta 4.3, which will have some new features to test out. And I also wanted to point out that, as Tudor mentioned, that a cost-effective tools, and I wanted to point out that all of HRE Roadmap Europe, including Petta, is free to use, so it doesn't cost you anything to use them. In the meantime, I would actually go back myself to a previous slide, which was focused on Alba Iulia, and ask Tudor his thoughts on some of the information that's found here. So one of the things that I talked about was a heat synergy region for Alba Iulia. Do you think that this could have some potential? Is it easy to cooperate with other towns, like you have Sebeș here to the south with its wood factory? Would it be feasible to develop a heat synergy region with them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have a lot of cooperation with our neighboring villages and towns, such as Sebeș. We have a lot of constructive cooperation with them, and yes, I think they could also be interested in such a tool. Indeed, they have a lot of industry as well, and a lot of workers commute from Sebeș to Alba and from Alba to Sebeș. And the Petta tool is useful here to observe the differences between the two cities and how the realities at local level are in terms of energy consumption. But in our case, I must say that we have a strong cooperation with the municipality of Sebeș, which is just 10 kilometers away from Alba Iulia, and we have even an association where they are involved as well from at various levels. It's an association that comprises the towns around Alba Iulia and also Sebeș, and we have many projects in partnership with them. For sure, in the energy area, there's room for improvement in terms of better measuring the consumption and seeing where it's more feasible to create synergies between the two cities at this level, at energy level. Because I'm pretty sure at the moment there's not a lot of let's say synergies in this area, especially since it's a very industrial town and they have different energy sources than Alba Iulia. So this, yes, this could be a place where we can work more with them.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'm going to go to the Zoom back through here and just invite all of you to attend the next webinar, which will be coming up in 2 weeks. We look forward to seeing you all on the 17th of May, where Tobias Fleiter, who is the coordinator for HRE Roadmap Europe project at Fraunhofer Easy in Karlsruhe, Germany, and he will be presenting their data they've come up with for heating and cooling profiles with their use of baseline scenarios for the current energy systems in Europe. This is the forecast data, which I showed some of the bar graphs. And as always, you can visit our website to get to know more about our project. It's www.heatroadmap.europe or .eu, sorry. And you can follow us on Twitter at HRE to stay updated. And just finally, to remind you again that the webinar has been recorded and it will be soon available on our website and YouTube channel. And we thank you for attending and we wish you a pleasant afternoon. Thank you.